I don't get hype much these days. That's not to say I don't get hype at all, that would be a big fat lie, but when it comes to conferences, I usually take what they show with a pinch of salt, especially from the AAA industry. So you could say it takes a special sort of game to surprise me or to go even further and hype me up, but this is exactly what happened when I saw the Nintendo Direct where they announced Deadly Premonition 2 of all things. It was crazy. It didn't matter what I thought of the original game or what a sequel could potentially be. It was just abso-fucking-lutely insane that a sequel to Deadly Premonition could ever exist. Yet, flash forward to June 12, 2020, and I just finished playing it. And boy, do I have some opinions about it. Originally released 10 years ago on the Xbox 360, Deadly Premonition was a Japanese tailor-made fever dream of what Twin Peaks could be if it made even less sense. I bought it and tried playing it, but it was so horrible, I found it to be so horrible that I quit. A few years later, a PC release happened and I decided to try again, only for it to crash endlessly and just refuse to be played. And even more years later, I had finally got my hands on the director's cut for the PS3 and I finally managed to play it all the way to the end. And I'm glad I had the mental fortitude to do so, because in the end, in retrospect at least, it was a very unique experience that you just can't get anywhere else. Now, there is some sort of saying going around in various communities, I suppose depends where you go on the internet, but I've heard many people say ever since the original release that the original Deadly Premonition was special because it had a so bad it's good vibe, similar to horror B-movies from times past. And while the game does play homage? It plays homage to those titles, I think that train of thought fundamentally misses the really good qualities that the game had. Deadly Premonition was, in my opinion, not so bad it's good. It was a game with genuinely good moments and very bad ones as well. It was a large piece of coal with tiny diamonds hidden on the inside, waiting to be found by anyone who had the patience to tolerate the worst moments. The setting is genuinely comfortable, let's say that, when horrible things aren't happening. The inhabitants of the small town the game takes place in are intriguing, and running around helping them in mundane tasks by doing some minigames or even just fetching an item MMO style, it was pretty great. Which makes it all the more horrible when the horrible stuff that I mentioned, the horrible events that compose the game's main plot, keep happening throughout the story, fracturing the small community bit by bit as they have to deal with the aftermath of the tragedies that keep piling up while you fear for the lives of the eccentric people you've grown accustomed to throughout your playthrough, while hoping none of them is the culprit behind the central mystery. It's truly fantastic storytelling, but you can only get to it if you're willing to play through janky exploration, even worse combat, badly animated characters, and a PS1 tier graphics open world. Which is to say, the game's ambition far outstrips the resources they had for its development. But on the other hand, if they didn't try to reach for the stars, it's unlikely the game would have had the charm it had and became the cult hit it is now. That is simply the walking gaming contradiction, well, I suppose not walking, but the gaming contradiction that the original Deadly Premonition was, and that is what you will find if you choose to partake in that adventure. And that was essentially a mini review for Deadly Premonition 1. Yeah, that was all just essentially a prologue to this video. But well, now we can get to the main stuff. So, how does the sequel stack up to the original? Well, it's more of the same, for better or for worse. Unfortunately, actually for worse in quite a few areas. Now, I usually don't go out of my way to play bad games, and because of that, I don't think any of the games I reviewed in this channel were bad games so far. Not any that I can remember. I haven't reviewed that many games, but I do have a slight memory problem. But I don't think any of them were like straight up bad games. Even the worst ones felt incredibly annoying in some places, but they were still good. There was still good in them. And believe me when I say I'm honestly happy that I got to play Deadly Premonition 2 in my lifetime, but I still have to warn everyone right out of the gate. This is by far the worst game I've played in 2020. If that sounds alarming, don't worry, I'm gonna elaborate on that. For now, sit back and relax, as with that little warning out of the way, I can start talking about the game proper. Deadly Premonition 2 takes place both before and after the events of Deadly Premonition 1. So as you probably know, spoilers abound in this review for the first game, a few spoilers. Don't worry, if you don't think too hard, you won't understand what I'm talking about anyway. That's kind of how Deadly Premonition, and by extension this review, is going to work, I guess. The story starts in a segment that takes place after the events of the original game, in which you play as super serious and kind of really mean actually, FBI agent Alaya Davis. She is accompanied by her goofy, one-time, pizza-loving partner Simon Jones. The year is 2019, and the severed corpse of a young woman was just discovered encased inside a block of ice in a cold storage facility. But it's not just any corpse, it is the missing corpse of a case from 14 years ago. So Alaya tracks down FBI Special Agent Francis Zach Morgan, the one who investigated the original case all those years ago, and sets up an interrogation as she suspects foul play on his part in relation to both that case and the Greenvale case from the first Deadly Premonition game. These segments play sort of like a dialogue-heavy old-school style adventure game, in which you just highlight objects and press a button to question Zack or Simon about the thing you chose, rinse and repeat until you finally get Zack talking about the old case from all those years ago. And that's fine. It gives you quite some time to get accustomed to each of the characters' personalities and highlights the strong writing sense of the game while showcasing just how much Swery has improved over the years as a writer, but it is our framing device for the real meat of the game. When Special Agent Morgan finally gets talking about the case, you get transported to the small city of Le Car in Louisiana on the outskirts of New Orleans, the Deep South as the game loves to call it. It is 2005, and during these segments you get to play as FBI Special Agent Francis York Morgan, a man who swears he was just passing by and just happened upon the city at the same time as the unfortunate murder just occurred. Liz Clarkson, a young woman, has just been murdered. Her body severed into pieces, ooh, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? And scattered across a macabre altar underneath a bridge. And it's up to York now to investigate and dig deep into the mystery of the murder if he wants to track down Saint Rouge, a mysterious, powerful drug that has taken hold of the south of the United States, and which is also somehow tied into the murder that just happened. But you have to be careful, as Liz Clarkson was the heir to the Clarkson Empire, a mysterious family with a dark history, and they are the sole proprietors of most of Le Car's business. They essentially own the city, and they have no plans of letting York run amok their land. And that is what I'd write for a blurb on the back of the box if they asked me to, even though I'm pretty sure that would be completely refused right out of the gate because it would be so long nobody would read it. Well, in fact, the story is much more complicated than it seems at first, and nobody plays the roles you'd expect them to play when you first meet them, much like the first game. The eccentricity of the characters you meet might as well be a key feature of the game. From the hotel, whose entire staff consists of a single person, but whose personality changes depending on the job he is doing, to the local sheriff who loves speaking while mimicking movie taglines, to an old lady that's a superstitious bowling aficionado to the point of cutting her hedges and even her dog's tail in the format of bowling pins. Everyone in Le Car is a lovable nutcase. The most notable example of all being Hugan, the skeletal gentleman as York calls him, who wears a face paint in the shape of a skull and a top hat and a dapper suit and a freaking albino snake as a necklace. Nobody else except York sees him, and he shows up in the reflection of mirrors, lakes, and other surfaces to give York hints about where to go next on his investigation. Yes, I know that sentence sounds incredibly weird and like it came out of nowhere, but you heard that completely right. This is a Sari game after all. And it's a good thing that the case, with all of the unexpected twists and turns that you might expect, isn't only a joy to accompany, but the writing, when it is spotty, is still backed up by amazing vocal performances. The cast knows exactly when to play it seriously and when to ham it up, and they bring in a whole new level of immersion to the game. At the beginning, it's easy to see them as silly caricatures without any depth, but if you talk to them and you listen and you allow them into your brain for a little while and try to see things from their perspectives, it becomes a lot easier to understand their motivations and grow attached to them. Of course, in a cast this large, there are bound to be a few outliers that are in fact just grating, annoying obstacles in your path that get no development at all, and sadly no amount of effort into their performances probably can save those cases. They didn't for me, they definitely won't for you, depending on your tastes. So, it is great that the cast and the writing are just as oddly charming as the first game, but what about the gameplay? How does one goes about doing all of this investigating after all? Well, you do that by exploring the worst fucking open world with the worst fucking performance ever. Excuse me, that was a little harsh, I admit it, but holy fucking shit does this game's performance sucks. It is inexcusably bad, especially when it comes to a sequel, where one would expect that the lessons learned from the first game would result in an improved experience, and bearing that, at least we could expect the same level of quality, but Deadly Premonition 2's performance is unbearably worse than the first game. Indoors, the game barely hits 20-25 FPS when it feels like it, and in the outdoors, prepare for frequent dips to the single digits. And all of that is after waiting up to a minute or more to load an indoor scene, and even more to load the open world. It's just crazy loading times. Not to mention that all of this is happening after the game completely abandoned any pretense of realism and chose a less taxing and more performance-friendly cel-shaded look compared to the first game's more realistic style. And the fact that the game suffers from severe pop-in issues where buildings will load in front of you as you walk around. There is no excuse for a game to perform this badly. There are 1 week, 1 man, asset-flipped efforts on Steam that perform better than Deadly Premonition 2. Warning: this was recorded before a patch to fix the performance issues came out. A little bird told me that it might not be as bad right now, but I don't have my Switch on me right now and I have no way to verify it. If performance issues were the only wrong thing with the game, I would be glad to say that maybe when they patch it, the game will become great. Sadly, the problems seep all the way into the design of the game itself. We now have a crafting system for voodoo charms, because hey, New Orleans, Deep South, if it ain't Mardi Gras time, I guess we gotta mention voodoo. And the system requires you to go out of your way to the borders of the city or to the more not populated, underpopulated areas, assuming there were any populated areas in the game. Only properly was. Anyway, you have to go to these far off places in order to hunt down random animals and hope that they randomly drop what you need them to drop. Assuming you don't just have to rummage around, hoping you find what you need randomly on the ground. That's right, there's a crafting system with random drops now. Who honestly thought Deadly Premonition needed one of those? The hunt is mitigated by your vision ability, which allows you to spend some of your vision juice in order to highlight all hints, clues, and objects in the vicinity, which does highlight enemies and objects on the ground that you can pick up, but good luck even aiming at those animals with this terrible performance. Not that any of this matters at all, since the charms you craft barely help in combat, and I was able to complete the entire game without crafting a single one. What is impossible to avoid though is when this random drop bullshit pops up in the side quests too. Oh wait, sorry, side quests in this game are also terrible. The original game also had some kind of terrible side quests, but at least they're avoidable. what's terrible and unavoidable is when this pops up in the main story quests, one of which requires you to hunt down tiny, super fast squirrels that steal from your inventory and disappear forever in the hopes that they will randomly drop their tails so you can give them to a crazy priest/doctor in a side plot line that, even though it's kind of a side plot line, even though it's on the main quest, it doesn't matter anyway because it doesn't really go anywhere. And just a brief reminder that I had to struggle all the way to the end of the quest, hunting down those tiny little things, trying to aim at them with precision, with the performance bringing me down the whole time as I try to kill those little shits. Now, this might just be nostalgia talking, but while I remember some side quests being boring as hell in the original game, the more annoying ones being timed to certain unpredictable events like rainy days, they were at worst tedious. Here, both the side stories and the main one can get actively aggravating, and the payoffs are barely worth your time. On the opposite end of the spectrum though, assuming the opposite end is good enough and not actually fun, is the combat. The combat wasn't improved upon so much as simplified, so whenever you engage in it, you won't think, oh fuck, not this again, and more like, oh, it's this again, huh? Like in the first game, the battles mostly take place in a nightmarish dark realm called the Otherworld, but unlike in the first game, you don't get an arsenal of weapons with potential side quest upgrades to play around with. Instead, York's arm transforms into a weirdly bloodless mess called the Psycho Gun, which can shoot enemies like a pistol, or if you charge it up using your Vision Juice, it can shoot multiple homing shots on the enemies you target. Most of the combat takes place in maze-like locations of big rooms, interconnected by small hallways that goes in all sorts of directions, requiring you to always pay attention to what might possibly be coming out of the next corner. Enemies can also inflict various status effects like paralysis, because of course we needed JRPG status effects as well. And in order for you to cure those status effects, you must wait out for them to just disappear, or you can cure them using an item from your inventory, which, by the way, is also a thing that exists, like many other things in this game, and that needs management, but not too much management, since the items in this game are so generous, you can just go into the Otherworld without a care, knowing that when you get there, the game will definitely provide everything you need along the way. It's in fact kind of weird how accommodating the combat system is, to the point where so many of its challenges are negated by its own design, almost as if the game wanted to not be aggravating at all in order to get you to hit the next story point, almost as if anything that's not the story doesn't really matter, except that outside of the combat, the side quests, like I said, can get pretty boring and grinding and aggravating, so I have no idea what the game's intention is. Do you want me to ease me between like the story beats? Or do you want me to fight tooth and nail through boring garbage no one else is willing to get you those golden nuggets? I have no idea. This game is so contradictory. But yeah, that's the combat. And actually, at the beginning, I was satisfied with the combat. It's simpler than the first game, sure, but at least it works better than the first game. And the indoor rooms where it takes place in don't fucking sink the performance to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, so I thought it was neat. Unfortunately though, as you go through the game, these sections that seem to be designed to not be aggravating at all, in fact start dragging out more and more, and oh, I kind of see where this is going. Huh. They kind of just wanted to bore you out in the end, didn't they? Well, anyway, they might shove in a new enemy type every chapter, who you probably just use the same strategy of using the homing shots against. There isn't much more to it, and considering the length of the game, yeah, I was bored out of my mind long before the game was over. It's simple enough to not be a bother, but repetitive enough to feel like dull homework. It starts as a neat treat, that is different from the side quests of the game, but it ends with you just going along with it because you need to if you want to move to the next cutscene. And it's in going from meeting to meeting, from cutscene to cutscene, from revelation to revelation, basking in the game's glorious personality and unashamed craziness that I found joy. But ultimately, the bars of gold that I searched for were placed between oceans of mud, and it's with sadness that I must declare that even though you spend most of your playtime doing these mundane tasks or boring combat, that somehow the gameplay sucks even more than the first game, even though it had every chance not to. And that's a bummer. But it is what it is, and I guess I gotta accept that. So anyway, let's recap. The setting is charming, the story is pretty cool, by my standards at least. Your standards might differ, of course. I do give some sort of lenience if the story is crazy enough and has the courage to try out new things, so to me the story is pretty cool. The combat is okay, it's basically filler between funny or emotional moments, but every single part of the gameplay, even if it's not combat, is brought down by the terrible performance. Did I forget something? Oh yeah, the soundtrack. It's pretty boopy. Considering the usual tone shifts of the game, it's surprising how it always feels appropriate at its worst, and at its best, we get some absolutely crazy good tunes. I want to highlight the opening theme as one of the best parts of the OST, and I also want to take this moment to give some honorable mentions to The Missing and D4 for also having great main themes as well. Swearing always straight up kills it with good themes. And I also want to highlight the jazz tunes that accompany the end of each chapter. Usually they cross-cut the best jazz bar scenes with mysterious or gruesome unexplained events that foreshadows what is coming up in the next chapter, which makes the entire experience very serious-like, and it wouldn't be able to do this without this excellent OST at its back. And with that, I think I finally covered everything I wanted to, except maybe for one little question that's on the back of the mind of anyone familiar with the legendary name of Deadly Premonition, but who never played the first game. And the question is, can I play the second one without playing the first one? Ooh boy, I wish I could act like a knight in shining armor defending all the latecomers to the wild world of Swery by saying yes. But that would be a big fat lie. The answer is no. You shouldn't play Deadly Premonition 2 before playing Deadly Premonition 1. All of the present day segments in Deadly Premonition 2, plus the entire last chapter of the game, is all one huge callback to the first game that is used in order to finally tie together all the loose ends left by the first game. If you get in here without playing the first game, you won't understand any of what's happening really on the last chunk of the game. Plus, Deadly Premonition 1 is already available on the Switch, and it plays better than the second game with a lot less annoyances, so you have no worries on that front. That being said, if you're not a fan of bad gameplay, who is a fan of bad gameplay, but if you're not willing to put up with bad gameplay to get to the interesting bits, then I have to honestly say you can just watch this on YouTube. I know it's not the same as experience the game and going through the pain of experiencing the game to get to the good parts, and if that's what you're looking for, if your friend said that you have to suffer through it, you don't. It's your personal choice. You can choose if you want to suffer through the more annoying bits to get to the good ones. But if you do, you want to buy the game, you can buy the game. But so much of the personality of the game is on the visuals and on the writing that you can experience everything that's worth experiencing in this game on a YouTube video. I'm sorry, fans that insist in playing the game, and I am one person that never recommends that. I am so annoying when it comes to I want to play with a controller on my hand that I can't watch videos of visual novels being played on YouTube because I want to be there pressing the button and forwarding the text when I finish reading it, and I can't tolerate staying there and tolerating other people's reading speeds. I read way too fast for that, and I'm sorry I went on a tangent right now, but the basic gist of all of this is, yes, if you want to just watch the game on YouTube, you won't miss the best parts. The best parts are all on YouTube. And that's it for today's lesson. which is that Swery never learns his lessons and apparently doesn't give a fuck about improving in a straight line, even when he has a complete case study of what to improve from. It is instead a lesson for us in humility. A lesson for us to learn and accept that he just wants to do crazy shit in his own unique way. And you know what, for all that I bash the game, if he had fun making it and I had fun playing it, that's enough, isn't it? I sure didn't have any fun though. Sorry, fix the fucking frame rate!